So as you guys know here on the channel, I always encourage you to, well, make a recommendation for a build. Now, typically that can be anything ranging from something in space, something I've never heard of, something from an anime show, and sometimes things that I regret, like today's build. Hey Terraria fans, welcome back to another speed build video, guys. Today I'm going to be making a Fall Cottage. Now, I know that doesn't sound like it's all that exciting or all that interesting, and yes, I realize by the time this video is coming out, we are well past the fall season. However, that said, this build was a challenge proposed by someone. I think it was in the Discord, or it could have been in a live chat. Guys, if you don't know, we stream live on Twitch and on YouTube because now there's multi-streaming and it's fantastic. Anyways, the challenge was proposed. I decided to give it a shot, and quite frankly, I don't know if I love the way this turned out. But what exactly is a Fall Cottage? I think cozy, I think comfy, I think cottagey, I guess, and we did our best to come up with something that kind of fell in between all of those things, but by doing that, we kind of came up with something that didn't quite feel right, so I don't know. Anyways, I did do my best to actually meet this challenge. I do think we hit some of those fall notes, and I do think we hit some of those cottage notes, but overall, this was a weirdly challenging build. So with all that said, guys, let's just simply dive into it, and you can, well, you can see for yourself. Alright, so for the start of this build, guys, you're going to see me starting off with the left side of our build, where I'm basically just using a couple of different materials, including some crystal, including some palm wood and some mudstone, as well as some normal wood. Again, using gray paint for all that feel. Now, I was trying to make a false foundation initially, but I didn't like the way it looked, so I actually came back and just sort of went back to the side piece. So this is the left side where I was trying to get a sort of 3D-ish or 2.5D look, where you could kind of see the side of the house, and then you'd actually be able to go into it. Now, at the start, this was all coming along fairly well. I think the roof looks nice. I think the side piece, while maybe a bit too dark, and that's maybe a mistake, it sort of feels like it's giving it a little bit of depth. However, as I start to make this other larger section of the house, I wanted to make it look a little bit more interesting, and I kept swapping out materials. I couldn't really find the ones that I really liked, but ultimately we ended up on something that's a little bit too complex for this design. A lot of wood that's embedded in the mudstone, and while it doesn't look bad, it just feels like it's a bit too much, and this goes back to the idea of keeping things simple. You don't always have to make things really intricate. In this case, I think this is probably where I ran into some problems. Everything was starting to get a little bit too textured, a little bit too overboard. Now, again, that's my opinion. The other thing is that this doesn't actually have a direct connection into the left side of the build. The idea is the door is on the left and you can't see it, and you're essentially walking into this cottage. Now, as we move up the build, I am trying to build a similar window where I think for the most part it looks okay. I was having a little bit of difficulty with the proportions, but once I got it right, we again used those crystal walls painted gray just to give us a window, and then went with our dynasty shingles to continue the rest of the design. But I did have a couple issues with the roofing. I couldn't decide on the design or the shapes after a while. I didn't really like what I had, and again, maybe I went a little bit too overboard. So despite something like a Fall Cottage that should feel fairly generic or fairly straightforward, and honestly something I've built in the past, I will say that this actually took a little bit more out of me than I thought. I really thought this was going to be a pretty straightforward build. So whoever proposed this challenge, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, but yeah, good on you for finding something that, even though it sounds simple, was actually pretty hard. Anyways, for a pop of color, I decided to paint everything here, I believe, a sky blue paint, or if not a blue paint, I can't quite remember, but don't worry, we'll cover all the materials here in a moment. And we just want to give this color just to make it feel a little different. I think fall colors, I think orange, I think brown, and obviously some red. So because I was going to do that for some landscaping, I decided to go with a blue, a white, and a brown palette for the most part. And I think that mostly worked out here. Again, you can see I'm always struggling with my roofing. This is an ongoing battle that I have, but overall, I think we ended up with a product that's actually not too bad once we put everything in place. Once I got the roof and the top layer windows done, which again does take me a little while, I knew I wanted to go into the inside of this room, which was supposed to be the only part of the house you could see, and make it feel a little bit more interesting than normal. And I think the way to do that for me was to add 2 layers of stairs or 2 floors, but keep them connected and separate at the same time, meaning the bottom floor was going to feel a little bit different than the top floor, the bottom floor being kind of more regal or open and big and interesting, and the top floor being more, well, just sort of a bedroom. So I did use a lot of different materials here, guys. Again, you'll see me playing around with different paints and different colors on this wallpaper wall, but once we got the windows in place, we just actuated them and put them into our diagonal or diamond position, and then we just kind of continued the theme upstairs. Now, again, I think here I probably could have kept using different wallpapers or different colors or just something a little bit different to break it up. But in the end, once I split the rooms into two and kept the same wallpaper, it kind of made everything feel a little bit more cohesive. Of course, we wanted a little fireplace as well, just to make this feel a little bit more cozy. And then from there, we just continued on with a bit of the decorations and a little bit of landscaping, which I'm going to let you watch here in peace. So guys, we'll see you at the back end of this. I will cover all of the materials and we'll finish off the video with my final thoughts. All right, folks, with our fall cottage build now done, I'm going to go ahead and cover all of the materials like I promised at the beginning of this video. Now, as always, I do encourage you to pause the video here if you want to get a snapshot or take a closer look at all of the materials in one shot, and if you're familiar with everything. But if you're not, then I will go ahead and cover them now. So we're going to start with the walls because there's a lot and they're fairly different. Now, for most of you folks, these are probably fairly recognizable, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the unique ones like the blue slab wall and our blue tiled wall. Now, I don't typically use these, but I like the way that these combine for some really cool texturing. I also painted that section black on the left side of the design. It probably should have been gray, in fairness. I think it makes it look too dark and stands out too much. The idea is that it would be all shaded and kind of give a sort of 2.5 or 3D effect to it. It didn't quite work out, but anyways, this is what we used in combination with some mudstone and some ebonstone. And again, we also used some crystal blanc wall for glass and a few other areas. I think this is a blanc I need to use more, or I should say a wall I should use more. I do like the texturing, particularly for windows, although I do think I could use it for the bottom of a structure or foundation of a structure. So I'm going to find ways to incorporate this a little bit more in the future, depending on the paint that I use as well. Beyond that, there's nothing too spectacular. We used some palm wood wall, some ebonwood wall, and some stone slab. We also used some rich mahogany, some glass, some white dynasty wall, and just a little bit of wooden fence along with some squiggle wallpaper. So nothing too crazy other than the blue tiled wall and the blue slab wall in my opinion, but hopefully this gives you a really good idea of all the walls that I did use. Again, you could probably replace a number of these with pretty much anything else that you like. Now moving along to the actual blocks, guys, again, we kind of used similar counterparts. So I used ebonstone, some stone accent slab, and some stone slab, as well as some mudstone, and then some palm wood and some ash wood. I did use quite a lot of wooden beams as well as some glass and some dynasty shingles. So overall, you know, not as many blocks as I did walls, but we used a variety here, and this is the house materials, and that's all you're really going to need. So it's not too daunting in my opinion. Lastly, but not leastly, paints. Now, when it comes to paints, guys, the ones that we really used a lot of are going to be our lime paint, our deep sky blue paint, some gray paint, some black paint, some brown paint, of course, and some white paint. Now, the trees, of course, I went with fall colors, so I'm going to be using some reds and some orange and some brown as well. But in general, just for the house, this is the only paints that I use. So there's only 6 of them. You could, again, change any of these out. I think if you didn't like the sky blue, you could have gone with a red or a green or something like that. But again, feel free to use whatever it is that you like. All right, so that covers all of the materials. And with that said, guys, let's go ahead and move on with the rest of the video. All right, guys, so there you go. There is our fall cottage build done. Now, again, as a final product, it doesn't look bad. I really am surprised by the person that proposed this, that I just thought this would be super straightforward and simple. And of course, this is often what happens. Something that feels like it should be easy is complex, and something that should be really complex somehow just comes together nicely. It happens all the time. If you build in Terraria, you've probably experienced this yourself, so don't worry, it happens to me too. Now, while I don't necessarily love the final product, I will say that there's a lot of good going on here with the depth and contrast. So while we have some roofing that maybe is a little bit flat and a little bit boring, we have a lot of different layers, a lot of different shapes and designs, and I really like how we're pulling in sort of this 2.5D effect, or adding this depth by having the left side be a little bit darker. We have some exterior components that you can see, and then we have an interior area that you can get into. So those are all really well and good and nice. But I will say, again, it's a little cluttered for me. It's a little bit much, and I do think it still has that fall feeling and that fall vibe, but it just seems like it's missing something. So I don't know what you guys think. I just think there's something a little bit off. If you know what is off, by all means, guys, leave me a comment down below about what you think, because I can't quite figure it out. But yeah, guys, with all that said, I do hope this encourages you to try something a little bit similar, or maybe a little bit better, because this is a fun little design to attempt and a fun little challenge to try. Although, again, you could probably maybe execute it just a touch better. Anyways, enough from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. And as always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.